Let's talk about movies, television shows, video games, books, comics, all that amazing stuff. I'm Ryan Buehler, and today I'm trying something new out on the channel. So I've noticed that the single movie reviews haven't really been getting that many views. And like I understand, we're in 2020. The roster of movies aren't that exciting. We're in the middle of a pandemic. We're not allowed at the movie theaters like we used to be. So the hype for movies really have gone down, and I feel that too. The excitement for movies is nowhere near how it was for 2019. So I get that. But with the Friday the 13th video that I did with the boys, talking about all the movies in an uncut podcast format, all you guys seem to really like it. I put up a poll asking which one you guys preferred, and most people voted for the podcast. So, I'm going to pursue that format going further. Obviously, I'm going to try to get the boys together as much as possible, but we all are on different schedules, and we're not all watching the same thing, so we can't always do those videos. I'm going to try my best, but we can't. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to try my best to do it on a weekly basis where I sit down and instead of just doing one movie and talking about that one movie for about 8 or 10 minutes, I thought, let's just talk about all the movies that I've seen recently. Maybe they'll be connected in some way somehow. Hopefully there'll be some new movies, hopefully some really good movies, maybe some really bad ones. But I thought that it would be nice to sit down and talk about these movies. So we're going to try out this new format, see how it goes. I don't know if I'm going to keep it with the face cam or if I'm going to go straight to audio when I get a new microphone and everything. So I don't know, we're just trying stuff out. And today I want to talk to you guys about the movies that I've seen most recently. So I am working on a project with a friend of mine involving the Godfather Trilogy. So I had only seen the first movie, so I wanted to really understand this franchise, this saga of movies, this trilogy. So I sat down, I bought Part 2 and Part 3, completed the trilogy. I sat down, rewatched Part 1, and then went through the trilogy. And I'm really glad that I did, because these are really, really good movies. These aren't just those things that are on essential movie lists that people just say because of how everyone just talks about them and they have dated. No, these movies are really good. Part 1 and Part 2 definitely earn those spots on those top 100 essential movie lists. Definitely. I'm going to try to talk about this trilogy without spoilers first, and then I'll put a timestamp in the description for you to jump to the next movie. Because today I'm going to be talking about the trilogy of Godfather movies, the newly released Mario Puzo's, or whatever his name is, The Godfather Part 3, Coda, The Death of Michael Corleone. So I want to talk about that as well. And then I also watched Scarface and the newest 2020 movie on Netflix, Mank. So, yeah, I'm just going to go down the line, jump to the movies that you want to, watch out for the spoilers. I'll save those to the end of the movies if I do spoil anything. And, yeah, okay, so, getting right into it, Godfather Part 1 is Francis Ford Coppola's masterpiece. It is definitely one of the greatest movies of all time. I understand that. Everybody does a fantastic job. Marlon Brando, Al Pacino, a very young Al Pacino. The story is amazing. I think the story is the best out of the trilogy as a singular movie. Francis Ford Coppola comes in with some amazing cinematography. Every shot in this movie could be a painting on a wall in a house. Everything is beautiful, and this is the first movie to really embrace using shadows. Most movies before this didn't really use shadows. Most characters were in proper lighting. so you could see everybody properly. This movie, dealing with a darker subject, had characters in the light and in the dark, and depending on the amount of darkness, the amount of shadows on characters' faces, could explain what's going on in the scene, what that character's motivations are, and that's really brilliant and amazing. Just to start it off, the story is about Vito Corleone, the Godfather, leading this crime family, and his number one priority is family. That's a very big importance in this trilogy. He has 3 sons and a daughter. The oldest son, Sonny, is kind of the next one to take his place when he gets older. Even though Vito definitely wants his son, Michael Corleone, played by Al Pacino, to take up his place. But Michael doesn't want anything to do with the family business. He wants to stay as far away from that as possible. But due to certain circumstances, Michael is thrust into the family business and has to become the next Don Corleone, the next Godfather. And the whole movie is really just the story of the rise of Michael Corleone into this business, and it was very well done. It's definitely slow if you're going in. You've probably seen other mafia movies. Mafia movies are usually longer films, really trying to establish the world and how the characters work and how the business works. There's a lot of dialogue. There's not too many shootout scenes. There are some, but not too many. So yeah, it's a really good movie. It deserves that greatest movie of all time title. Moving on to part 2, a lot of people consider this to be the greatest sequel to a movie. And after I finished watching it, I completely understand why people would say that. This movie is brilliant. I don't think it's as entertaining to watch as the first one as a cohesive story, because this one jumps back and forth between present-day Michael Corleone, the Godfather, and in the past, Vito Corleone when he was a younger man, played by Robert De Niro. And the film, instead of just jumping back and forth, you get like 30 minutes of Michael, 30 minutes of Vito, and you go back and forth. So, I think that there's a little bit of an issue with that, because I got to a point where I would get invested in the story that I'm watching, and then we would switch to a different character and be like, I want to go back. So I'm just waiting for it to go back to that character, and I found myself enjoying Vito Corleone's story a lot more, because we're learning about him going from somebody who had no money to becoming the Godfather that we see in part 1. And Robert De Niro did an amazing job as Vito Corleone. He really captured Marlon Brando's performance. It was amazing, and it was just really interesting to see how he became the man that he would become in the first one. Now, countering that is Michael Corleone's fall because of certain decisions he makes during the movie. Now, I don't want to spoil too much of the story, so I'm not going to say, but a lot of people consider this to be one of the greatest tragic films that we've seen in cinemas, and I completely understand that. They really counter each other, of watching Vito do things the certain way and rising, and then watching Michael making the wrong decisions and falling, and watching that going back and forth really is beautiful, and really trying to think of the word that what I'm trying to say. Very cinematic, I guess, poetic. But without spoiling that, we're going to move on to part 3, which is following Michael Corleone in his later years of his life, and he's trying to redeem himself of all of the mistakes he made in part 2 in his earlier life. He wants to become closer to what his father was to him, and he's trying to focus on family like his dad did. And the whole film is really just about him redeeming himself. This film is definitely considered to be the weakest out of them, and it definitely is. I think it's definitely the most cohesive story. It's pretty consistent on the events, and being a gangster film, it's not really like really slow, action-packed, really slow, but it has those action-packed moments, but it's pretty consistent on being a story about Michael. And it also follows a lot of the same story moments, story events like part 1, which I thought was pretty awesome to see it kind of go full circle, see those similarities to the later in life, kind of passing the torch next generation kind of thing. Was really good, but it definitely is the weakest one. It's actually like it's the first one out of the trilogy that I actually really noticed that it was Al Pacino in the role, because I only remember him as him older now, because I only seen his like more recent movies. So yeah, I could actually see it was Al Pacino in this film. Everybody does a good job. The only really big thing that I had an issue with this film was the romance in this film, because it's incest, it's cousin and cousin. I felt like it was very unnecessary and just strange, and I was really confused on why they went in that direction. It did not work for me, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people can agree on that, of being just a strange addition to the story. It didn't really add too much to the film, I think. I don't think it did. Now I'm going to talk about some spoilers of the trilogy. So if you want to jump to the death of Michael Corleone, the re-release of part 3, go ahead now. So the brilliance of this trilogy, I thought, came from the, what's it called? There is a very big similarity to the Star Wars story of Anakin Skywalker. In the Star Wars universe, you follow Anakin Skywalker. He doesn't have a father figure. Qui-Gon Jinn is training him. Anakin needs that father figure. Qui-Gon can be that father figure that he needs to become a Jedi. Qui-Gon dies. Obi-Wan attempts to take his place, but can never reach that level of being a father figure. He gets just to a level of a brother relationship with him, and inevitably Anakin turns to the dark side because he doesn't have that father figure. That is the exact same thing that happens in the Godfather Trilogy. In the first one, we'll say the Godfather is Qui-Gon Jinn, Michael Corleone's Anakin, and the number 2, Tom, is Obi-Wan. So, in part 1, when Michael joins and becomes the new Godfather, his father is there to help him, aid in anything that he needs him to, any advice. Michael listens to all of his advice and is always going and listening to him and everything. And he's setting him on a good path, a positive path of making friends. But unfortunately, that doesn't... When the Godfather passes away, Michael no longer has that support, that advice. And Tom attempts to be that person to him during part 2, but he never is able to convince Michael to go down that better path, leading to Michael going down this dark path of killing people. Because Vito Corleone's focus was to make friends, make allies, fix issues properly, where everyone can come to an understanding and peace. Michael wants to end the problems. Someone betrays him, he kills him. When he kills that person, he makes new enemies, and it just keeps spiraling out of control. He's not focused on his family like his dad was, so he loses his wife, and his kids go on without him. So he's really in a dark place at the end of part 2, and it was a really beautiful, except tragic, story to watch unfold. And then part 3 is really just about him attempting to fix those issues with his family and becoming a better person. And it was pretty... It was a solid conclusion to the story, but it did not match the level of storytelling as part 1 and part 2. Now moving on to The Godfather, Coda, The Death of Michael Corleone, the re-release that just came out in 2020. This is Francis Ford Coppola's new edit of the film. He wasn't satisfied with the title that was put out, Godfather Part 3. This was the original title that was changed, so now it's properly titled. And he said that there were changes made to the film. And these changes are very small but very important. So the big two things, it has a different opening and it has a different ending. Now, it's not like they reshot things. This is just kind of moving things around and cutting things and changing the depth of them. So the opening of the film is different from the original Part 3. If you have seen Part 3, it opens up on kind of reflecting on the ending of Part 2, and Al Pacino is being inducted in this ceremony in a church. That scene is completely cut out of the new release, and now it is a scene that's actually later on in Part 3. It's moved to the front, and it's it parallels with Godfather Part 1, where the movie opens up with Don Corleone dealing with business. And it also properly sets up the entire film on establishing that Al Pacino's Michael Corleone no longer wants to do illegal things. He wants to better his life and go down a better path. And that sets up the movie very well. That's how the movie should have started to begin with. The rest of the film, I didn't really notice too much of a difference. I've only seen Part 3 once, so I didn't really notice too much. I don't think there were too many things that were changed. Maybe things were shortened or scenes were moved around. I'm not sure. But when it comes to the end, there is a little bit of a change. So the final moment of the film is Michael being shot at by an assassin. Michael's hit but doesn't die, but his daughter standing next to him, she gets hit and dies on the scene. This destroys Michael, and the final moments of Part 3 is Michael. He's alone in a chair, old. He falls out of the chair and dies, paralleling to the death of Vito Corleone, which I kind of like, but the new ending I think has more impact because Michael went down this dark path. He attempted to redeem himself. He killed his own brother in Part 2, and he has to live with that and all of the bad mistakes and tearing up his marriage and his family. He goes through all of Part 3 trying to fix everything, and he still gets what he deserves and loses his own daughter. And it's more poetic than watching just Michael physically die. He spiritually dies, you could say. I was reading an article about Michael, or the differences in this movie, because I wasn't 100% sure exactly if I caught everything properly. So I'll put a link in the description for that if you want to read it. It's more in-depth look into the film and the differences and stuff. But he kind of just stands there, the camera zooms in on his face, and then some words come up on the screen explaining that that they never forget. And instead of dying, he has to live with himself, knowing that he pretty much failed where his dad succeeded in. Overall, very good trilogy. If you've never seen Part 3, I'd probably recommend just watching the re-release because I think it is a better edit of the original. If you have seen the original, you don't have to see this new one. But if you are ever going to re-watch it, I would recommend checking this one out. I think that opening scene definitely sets up the movie much better. Because that whole ceremony scene in the church was really slow and not exciting. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the Godfather movies. When you go into these movies, you just need the expectations that it's going to be slow, it's going to be long. The only critique that I have with these movies is because there's so many characters, you can't really follow all of the events properly. You're not really sure exactly what that character did because there's so many people in suits. You just don't really recognize everybody and remember all the events that happened in the film because there's so much that goes on. That's the only critique. Sometimes I was like, oh, hey, why are they killing that guy? Or why is that guy killing that person? I don't know. Yeah, So that's the Godfather movies. Now I'm going to move on, just briefly talk about the movie Scarface that came in Al Pacino's later career. Just in the mood for mafia movies, I was like, I have this movie on Steelbook, so I was like, I really want to check it out and cross it off of my bucket list, and I'm so glad I did. It was a really good movie. Compared to the Godfather movies, it's not as slow. It's still a long movie, but it's not as slow. It's pretty consistent on being a slightly... It slowly builds up in the movie. There's a lot of action sequences. Al Pacino's performance is really awesome and entertaining. The action sequences are awesome and violent, and the story of watching someone literally can't even... He's an immigrant from another country, Cuba. He gets to the United States, and he's stuck in a cage, pretty much, in this fenced area. He can't leave. He doesn't have a green card or any of that. And going from that all the way up to being this king of this drug trade and just having so much money and everything that he wanted but didn't at the same time. It's a really good story, and it's 100% worth checking out. I really enjoyed it. It had some iconic lines, iconic moments. You already know what it is. I'm happy I finally got to see it. Very good movie. But yeah, these mafia movies are very long. Godfather Part 2 was 3 hours and 33 minutes. So I understand if it's definitely hard to get into these movies, but they're definitely awesome. The Irishman on Netflix was really good. They have a very specific audience, and you have to just be prepared for that when you watch them. They're not the most exciting films in the world, but they're really interesting and enjoyable. Now, moving on to the main event, the movie Mank came out on Netflix this month, starring Gary Oldman, Amanda Seinfeld, and directed by David Fincher. This movie was really good. As soon as I heard that we were getting a movie by David Fincher starring Gary Oldman about Citizen Kane, they didn't even have a movie poster up or anything. I was like, sign me up. I'm ready to go. And the movie did not disappoint. It's not as entertaining as other David Fincher movies. It's a very slow movie, but it pays respect to the time period. It really feels like you're watching a movie back then. It's black and white. All of the opening credits are just like older movies. The scenes are very long, and majority of the entire film is just dialogue. You're just there watching Gary Oldman talk to people about making movies and learning about how the industry was working back during the Great Depression and all of that. It's a very interesting movie. I love based off true story movies, and especially when they're about the movie industry. So this was an awesome watch. But yeah, it's a longer movie, and the whole thing is really just watching Gary Oldman's character, Herman Mankiewicz, the writer of the iconic movie Citizen Kane. You don't have to watch Citizen Kane to watch this movie. You'll just understand what's going on a little bit better, because Orson Welles is in this movie, and he's the director and main actor from Citizen Kane. So you're not going to get any spoilers or anything watching this movie, I don't think. So you don't have to worry about that. But I definitely, if you haven't seen Citizen Kane, you should watch it just so you can appreciate this movie. And I hope this movie sends people in that direction to watch that movie, because it is an iconic film, and it's worth watching at least once. But yeah, doubtful that you've seen in Friday the 13th video. He told me some interesting things about this movie. The film Mank was actually written by David Fincher's dad. It was written while he was battling cancer, and he finished the script before he passed away in 2003. So to watch David Fincher bring his dad's script to life is very beautiful, and it sends so much more. It makes this movie so much more, because it really was important to David Fincher. This was a movie he had to make. It was the last thing it's the only thing his dad's credited with. So that's just beautiful, and you got to respect that. David Fincher really did it justice. Gary Oldman is a master at acting. He didn't disappoint. He was amazing in this movie. it's just awesome. The attention to detail, the way that the scenes fade in, fade out, just like old movies were, just the look of the film. It looks crisp and beautiful for now, but it still pays respect to that old black and white time. And there's that little mark from the reel that comes up here and there during the movie, just really selling the fact that this movie is supposed to be back from that time period. Yeah, I mean, it's a really good movie. It was a great addition to his fantastic library. I need to watch more David Fincher movies. I feel like I'm only like halfway through his filmography. But yeah, if that sounds like something that you would check out, I definitely would recommend it. It's not for everybody, but I think everybody should give it a shot because it is a great story, and it's always awesome to learn about what really happened and kind of shining a light on Herman Mankiewicz because he brought us this fantastic movie, but whenever you think of Citizen Kane, you think of Orson Welles. So it's nice to give that man the respect he deserves, because the story's really just about Gary Oldman's character, Herman Mankiewicz. He's a drunk, and you're watching him go through the process of being in the film industry and sitting down and writing a script, and how his process was of sitting down and thinking about it, and it kind of jumps back and forth between his life before he was writing Citizen Kane and during the process, and jumping back and forth, and when he is writing Citizen Kane and afterwards and all that. The only critique I can think of for this movie was there was a couple parts that I wasn't 100% sure exactly where it took place in the timeline. I wasn't sure if it took place before Citizen Kane or after or during. But I mean, it doesn't hurt the movie because it doesn't really it doesn't matter where it takes place in the timeline. But it was a little confusing. But I mean, it's a David Fincher movie. So yeah. That is my first entry into this new format of these videos. I don't know how long it's been. I don't know if you guys are going to enjoy this new setup. I don't know if I'm going to switch over to just doing audio or not. Or if we're going to switch up the format, go back, or change it up. I don't know. We're going to just go with the flow. I just really want to sit down and talk about movies. And I don't really... It doesn't matter too much to me if this channel becomes huge or thousands of people watch these videos. I'm just being productive. I'm sitting down, I'm trying to do something, and this is where it's led me. I love posting videos on YouTube. I love getting the subscribers, the likes, the comments, getting the support from people, knowing people actually sit down and click on my video and watch it. Seeing 25 people sit down and watch my video is a win for me. I mean, obviously, I would love to see it to go to a higher level, but knowing that 25-ish people actually sat down and wanted to watch my video is enough for me right now. So hopefully we can get some more support and more people check out the channel. But yeah, that was the Godfather Trilogy, the new Godfather Part 3. Not too big of difference, but impactful nonetheless. And then Scarface and the new movie Mank. So we'll see what I watch this week or next week. Trying to figure out when I can sit down with the boys. We're talking about different kind of videos that we could sit down and talk about. Because I definitely agree that the energy with other people is more enjoyable, and it'd feel a lot less like work. It'd feel like just sitting down and talking movies and the camera's just rolling, or the microphone's just picking up audio. So yeah, we'll figure it out. So this has been Ryan Buehler, and go check out those movies. Have a great night.